We live in a world with much confusion, propaganda, and outright lies. It's hard to know what's real, what's false, and what's really going on. Do you have even one source that you can trust? And I mean really trust. Can you imagine leading a state or an army or a nation in this environment? What if you heard from God every day about your life, your purpose, and your future, and you understood with clarity what to do? Imagine hearing so clearly that he even trusted you with intelligence to advise leaders desperate for answers. Hi, I'm John Redenbow, and I have the honor of leading the Spiritual Intelligence Mentorship, an in-depth program where a team of people work with you in a highly structured atmosphere to teach you how to decode the encrypted language of God through dreams. If you're up for the challenge, I invite you to apply today. Register at spiritualintel.com. Hello and welcome to Dream Talks. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce a new friend of mine that we're having on the show today. He had me on his show and we ended up talking about a dream and we really got into it, and it was, I think it was a fan favorite. So people just loved this show, and God has a definite identity and a calling on this man's life. And so I wanted to have him on Dream Talks and share some more about dreams and about what God is doing in his life. So this is Alpha Warrior. Hey man.
How's it going, brother? Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. It's good. Do you go by Alpha all the time? Is that what all your friends call you?
So in home or, regular life, most of the people call me Luna. Between the military, law enforcement, if somebody was to call, my real name is Alfredo. Growing up, Freddie. But if someone said, "Hey, Alfredo," I probably wouldn't even look, because, like I said, it's always just been Luna, 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 Luna. And then, when the show started, social media footprint, it's always been Alpha. So,
yeah.
But you know what? People could just say, "Hey, man," that works too.
Somebody says Alfredo, and you're like, "No, marinara."
Exactly.
Where's the sauce? Where? Me.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
My last name is Redenbow, and that's why I always tell people I'm Italian, because I can cook Italian and it ends in O. And our family goes back like pre-Civil War, like it's just all American mutt. But yeah, in the military, they'd be like Redenbow, they're calling you for mail or something. Redenbow. I said it's Redenbow. Yeah, Redenbow. That's what I said. Okay, whatever.
Close enough, man.
So you were in the military before you were in law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about military life.
Yeah, I saw witness, 9/11 like everybody else. A few days later, I was in the recruiting office, scored really well. They wanted to send me off to do JAG. And I was like, no, man, like, you saw what just happened. I want to give me a rifle and some boots. They're like, no, you don't want to do that. That's for the dumb crayon eaters. And I'm like, I want to be a crayon eater. And that's always stuck since. So went, joined it, became infantry. Now, for my other grunts out there, I got attached to a light armored reconnaissance battalion, so we didn't have to hump. Our rucksacks went on LAVs, so people are like, "Well, were you really infantry?" I'm like, "Don't be jealous." So did that. Went to Iraq in 2003. Came back. It was from February to September. Then after that, ended again to the police academy in 2005. Got picked up and did my career. Which, got taken from me on January 9th of 2019. A whole other story there. And then from there, started the battle to get my job back, land me in the crosshairs of the government for a little bit, and decided I wanted to be a voice, and started a podcast, and now we're here.
Now here we are. Now you are world famous. Alpha.
Getting there.
That's awesome. How did you pick the name Alpha Warrior? Just based on Alfredo, or?
No, I prayed about it.
Really?
I prayed about it. Because it wasn't an easy choice to do. Like, I knew I'm a man of principle. And sometimes, when you're about principles, that can make the fire around you get a little hotter, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going against the grain. And I knew that the FBI would be monitoring everything that I was doing. So, but I said, you know what? If I don't have the courage to, share my truth, or at least a different perspective, if people don't want to call it the truth, then who's going to? You know, if we're just going to allow media to show one side of a coin, I didn't like that. So I prayed
Man, I'm
about it.
glad you stopped yourself and said you were saying my truth, and then you said the truth. I hate that term, my truth. Well, it's my truth. I can be whatever no. There's what's real, and then there's what other people have coddled you who don't want to tell you the truth, who want to pretend that you can live in this whole make-believe world and it's actually real. And because the media for so long has been gaslighting like all of America, we have this, they're trying to make the lines between truth and fiction. It's whatever you say it is. And no, it's not. And I'm not going to play your game, and I'm not going to gaslight, and we're not going to do this. My truth, your truth. These are the facts. This is what happened, period. We can talk about different perspectives on it, but there isn't my truth and your truth. And so I like the fact that you corrected that. You were like, the truth.
Absolutely. You know, two words, at least in my adult life, that have been completely abused is the word truth and the word friendship. You know, and we can do a whole podcast on that. And so, yeah, so
that's not true friendship.
Exactly. So I prayed about it, and you know, I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So now that I feel peace at making my decision, because you know, when I got upstairs to let me know if I'm doing it right, his way of letting me know is I immediately feel peace about my decision, and I immediately felt peace. I was like, okay. So now I was like, what name? Like, you know, what name do we do? And the name Alpha. So Alpha and Omega kept coming to me, but I just never felt the connection with the Omega part of it. I know this probably sounds funny, but I just never felt like it. The Alpha felt really strong in my mind and in my heart, but the Omega didn't. And so I was like, all right, well, I got half the puzzle there, you know. And then Warrior came, and I was just like, well, I like Warrior, you know. I mean, it's what I've spent pretty much half of my life, you know, committed to. And then I was like, okay, Alpha and then Warrior. Alpha's the front, you know, the beginning, and Warrior, someone who fights. So, you know, it's kind of like the first person going into battle. And I was like, I like that, you know, it resonates with me. So
yeah,
Alpha Warrior.
I like it. Prayed about it and got the name. That's cool. Good deal. Well, last time we talked about one dream that you had, and it was in our world, it was kind of a long dream, just because, you know, as you know, I think we went into 2 hours, you know, just unpacking that. But it was such a powerful dream, and we got so many comments on your show about that, and so many people were just like, "Man, we see this in you," and they just love the leadership that you have and the voice that you are, and you know, and the call of God on your life, I think, is something that really showed through, not only through your experiences, but a lot of times when, especially somebody that's relatively new to dream interpretation at the level that we do it, if they have an identity or a destiny dream and we can hear God on it correctly and we nail it, suddenly like pieces of their life start to make sense. Or like, oh, well, you mean that was, and you know, and stuff just is like, they're firing on all cylinders, and they're like, oh my gosh, so that was this and that was that. And it was really interesting because I think that happened with you somewhat, but it also happened with your audience, because people just kept chiming in with, man, I see that. And man, you're such a leader, but you're so laid back and you're calm and you have that strength and that courage about you. And so I thought it was really, really interesting how, you know, when we do a dream, especially when we do it on a show, and, you know, again, every Tuesday we do live dream interpretation, right? So when you do something live, you just have no idea what you're going to get. And so I've had people invite me on their show, and then they do a dream, and I'm like, are you sure you want to get into it? And so one person, in fact, will even be like, hey, I want you on the show, but I'm going to send you the dreams in advance because I don't want you to, not that I would embarrass them, but one dream they had was like all about their personal relationships. And, well, you've had this since you were a little girl, and you've had this idea of your wedding. And she's like in tears and just like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, this is kind of the risk you take when you do stuff on a, you know. And so I really appreciate you being vulnerable and putting yourself out there, because that was a really, really deep dream. That was a dream about identity and destiny. What were your thoughts after? Because, you know, we started it like at the tail end of the interview, And then we just extended the interview and we went like over 2 hours, but we were still kind of like trying to get done and it was late at night. And so we didn't have a chance to like really let it breathe and kind of say la and just really take time to kind of take in all that happened there. So I wonder what your thoughts were as you processed that. And if you share that, you know, with your wife or your family, or just kind of what your thoughts were. We're about a week out since that last time that we connected.
So immediately following the show, the first thing that I felt was like I was exhausted. Like not like you go to the gym or you go for a run exhausted. Like I've been working for 3 days type of exhausted. Like I just felt, I just felt so tired. But I also felt like, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, and also during the intro, all of a sudden, like all these other old dreams and thoughts and different things that I experienced in life, it's like this puzzle like started to come together, you know, or at least the pieces started to get flipped over. So I'm not looking at the cardboard side. Like it's like, okay, there's something here. Now I just got to find out where it goes. And I really felt like I wanted to figure it all out that night, you know, but I was also so tired. So I kind of set the course of, you know, hey, it's okay to have these dreams. It's okay to share these dreams, and it's okay to be like, you know, it's more than just my brain running images or memories. Mm-hmm. Like this is a connection between me and my God to say, hey, knucklehead, I'm trying to get through to you. Like, you know, you need to start listening, you know, because you are stubborn and I don't want to have to tighten the wrench on you. So let's communicate this way. And, you know, after having that conversation with you, I felt very empowered by knowing, hey, this is the way your God is communicating to you. This is the way he's trying to send you intel. So start working with him and stop denying it or writing it off that it's just a dream. I think that was probably the most important thing that I came away with.
Wow. That's awesome. You know, we have kind of two sides to what we do. We have our YouTube channel, we have Facebook, we have, you know, Twitter, Instagram, Rumble now, but the Dream Life Decoded side. And the whole goal of that is to just share with people that God still speaks through dreams. Because for most people, for I think the average audience, that's a big step. Because most people don't write their dream. I've been writing like just about every single dream I have down for about the better part of the last 17 years. And so for me, 450 pages, type single space of a searchable document. If I have a dream about my dad, I can type in dad and I'm like, oh, there's 88 other occurrences of the word dad. Or if I have a dream about President Trump or Joe Biden or, you know, whoever, I can be like, oh, well, I've had 3 or 4 different times. A friend of mine we just unpacked in the last show that we did. A lady had a dream about the Obamas. And it's interesting because I've had a couple of dreams recently within the last probably 2 or 3 months that I was sitting down and having an extended dinner conversation with Barack Obama, you know. And this has happened a couple of times. I've done this with Trump too. And I used to do it with George Bush all the time. But the thing that's been interesting about Trump and Obama is we've seen so many dreams that people have had about Trump or Obama or whatever that they send them in. And so now when I have a dream that I'm sitting down talking to them, I'm telling them about a dream. Hey, did you know that this guy dreamt that this is what was really going on behind the scenes and this is what it appears, but this is what's really happening. And at one point I kind of called Obama out based on this dream that somebody else had, and he gets mad and he gets up and he walks away. And then I say something that would be very complimentary to him. And so he comes over and he sits back down and re-engages in conversation. And it was interesting because in the dream, I was just like, I don't really want the conversation to end. I mean, I just thought it was, it's cool but it was, it was just so beyond the realm of what my everyday life is like. I don't dine on a regular basis with Barack Obama, at least currently, but, you know, and it's so funny because, again, if God wants to challenge our belief system or our heart, he'll give us something, because, a lot of people would really have a problem sitting down to have dinner with certain people. And it's not based on any personal level of relationship, because they don't know these people. It's based on what we've been told, probably 90% by the mainstream media or alternative media, that says who these people are. This is who these people are. And so it's super interesting, because I think God can begin to change hearts of people. It's hard, man, in this environment, as you know, not to be so so hardened or full of vitriol at what we perceive is the threats to this country and to democracy and to the children and to America. And it's so hard not to be, just one of these people on social media who's attacking everybody. It's, there's so many times I go to write something and God is like, really? All right. The world doesn't need to know my opinion on everything. I tell you, man, there's been times that I would, especially like after a school shooting or something, that I'd feel emotional. And so what I know now to do is I'll write a whole article, like an op-ed. And most of the time I'll never send it anywhere. I actually started sending him to my mom and dad, because I'm a writer and I've won awards and been published internationally and whatever. And so they like to read my stuff. But I'm just like, yeah, the world doesn't need my opinion, because most of the time it's so unfiltered that it's gonna piss off at least half of anybody that read. They're just gonna absolutely hate my guts. But I'm trying to think outside the box and problem solve. And, so do you do that when you have thoughts on your show, or when you see something that really incenses you or makes you upset or concerned about the danger of this country or our children? What do you do with that?
So I used to be very like impulsive with my reactions. Like if I saw something, like, no, you're going to hear how I felt, and you're going to get, that unfiltered opinion. But since doing this show, I've kind of worked on that. And only because I see the responsibility that we carry, and when I see something, yeah, I'm probably going to get angry about it, just like my audience does. But, I see myself as a peer to my audience, but I do know a lot of my audience does see me in a leadership role. So if I generate an opinion that's based off emotion and I haven't had a chance to digest it, look at the facts, what's the big picture of how this works, I don't want to lead my people in the wrong direction, or influence the way their thought process is. So I try to give myself a little bit of time to kind of look at things, see what the 48-hour rule turns out to be, and then go from there. I'm not perfect. I haven't perfected it, but I've gotten better at it. So, but I see something, man. Sometimes I'm just like, I'll do what you do with your writing, and I'll get all the way to the tweet, and then I'm just looking at maybe I'll just let it save in the draft for a while. Let's see if come Monday I still want to send this, and then we'll go from there. So
Yeah,
I'm working on it.
I feel like the media with the news cycle, and not that all of the media is bad, just 99.99997%. No, I'm really not a media hater, but I feel like there's such a group of people that have been bought out and relegated their responsibility to inform the public. And they've been bought out by the highest bidder, by whatever. And I know there's people in there that really believe that they're doing a good job, and most of them are controlled by overlords or corporate sponsors, or they can't really talk about it. And we've seen even in the last 2 weeks what happens when somebody wants to tell the unvarnished truth. And we hold up these guys that do tell the unvarnished truth as if they're heroes on the level of like Abraham Lincoln. And they're saying what we all say when we talk to our friends. Like, none of this stuff is new. Most of this stuff isn't revelationary. We're just applauding because finally somebody with a microphone actually said it, and wasn't afraid of what was going to happen. But I think that they've really gotten finely tuned in to how to create the emotional response specifically to distract. And I don't even know if most of them, especially the people, you know, that are reporters and things like that, if they really know how they're being used to gaslight the public in the news cycle. Because so many times when there's the latest, you know, well, let's talk about something that hits close to home. There's the latest minority teen that's shot, unarmed teen shot by a police officer. And immediately everybody's ready to, you know, burn this guy's house down and everything. And I'm always like, and I look at my friends who are thought leaders, who are Christians, who are hopefully have a little bit of discernment. And I'm like, guys, can you wait 5 minutes until the rest of the story comes out? And then sure enough, they're like, well, this was this and this was this. And actually he just killed 4 people, you know, right over here, that he ran into this and then he did that. And, you know, and it's just like, not that anything justifies, the ends don't justify the means, but we get that tiny little piece of edited video footage and we're literally ready to go hang somebody, you know, and we don't even get the story. And then we find out later that, wait a minute, the guys that Rittenhouse shot were white. They weren't black, you know, and you just realize that the media distorted everything for the narrative. And the people that jump in early, to me, they're idiots. There's no other way to say it. A lot of my friends jump in early. I love my friends, but guys, a little bit of discernment. Wait a minute until the story comes out. And, you know, I really learned this back. 2 things. Because I was a news junkie. I mean, the day that CNN came out, yeah, I was in the first Persian Gulf War. And so it was a connection between what was actually happening overseas and what was going on back home. And they could see live, you know, the aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf that I was on. And, you know, my family would be like, there he is, and blah, 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 you know. And so it was like this huge thing back in the day. And I even met the president and CEO of CNN at one point and had a conversation with him. And it was just like, wow, I really liked CNN, you know, again, albeit 30 years ago. But then it turned into something, I think it was with the 24-hour news cycle. And I don't even know why we got on this, but people just felt the need that they had to get vitriol opposing reactions and polarize. Well, we need the most radical person on the right against the most radical person on the left. And if we can get him on the show and just let him scream at each other for 5 minutes, somehow that's supposed to be good TV. And this is where reporting the news went out the window and they were slave to advertisers and ratings. And if we can get the Jerry Springer effect, you know, no disrespect to Jerry Springer, because Jerry Springer is a little bit better news than some of what's going on right now, if we're going to be honest about it, then somehow that's going to help us sell more advertising. And, but I watched the I watched Princess Di's death and the Olympic bombing unfold on live TV. I was up late at night, and first the initial report comes in, like particularly the Olympic bombing. And that was, where was that? I think it was Atlanta. I just did a movie about that. And, you know, it's 45 people dead and massive explosion. And then you end up finding it was like a paper bag with like an M80, half a stick of dynamite and a couple of nails and something. And one guy died, but it's because he had a heart attack. Like, and you just see how the reports come in and they just print everything as egregious as it is and super high body counts and all of this stuff. And then as the months and days, you know, as the days unpack and even hours unpack, then they're like, well, no, actually there's not that many. No, the hospitals aren't flooded. No, there's one guy cut his finger. You know, you're just like, I think we would learn in the age of social media to just give it a minute before we respond. But it's almost like the news is designed to do that, you know?
Well, you bring up a good point with that, especially with social media. You know, we're all, you know, hundreds of millions of people, you know, on the internet, on these different platforms, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So think about the metadata and the algorithms, you know, that are, you know, being tracked. You know, Alpha goes on, and when he sees this post, he immediately reacts. When he sees, you know, these words, these will generate not just a like, but he'll comment. Like they know our social media reaction better than we know our social media reaction. So sometimes when you're getting ready to respond, you got to say, do I really want to respond, or did they send me something to push a response? Mm-hmm. And then weigh that out and see how you feel about it. Because, you know, I love what Elon's doing, and I'll exploit what he's doing, but I still have a hard time trusting Elon. And, you know, he just bought a company that just has a lot of information about, you know, the way we respond, our digital personalities, you know, and that's, for me, that's not something to be ignored.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we got to be super careful. You know, in the age of literally question everything and who do you trust? Like, two of the biggest people that we used to trust, we used to be able to trust things like law enforcement. Like we used to, I remember when I had a friend of mine join the FBI, and I was just so proud of him. Bro, you're in the FBI. Like, how amazing is that? You know, and now I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? You're in the FBI. Like, you know, these guys are like, are you kidding me? You know, and doctors was another one. Like, man, the two people you could count on was law enforcement, especially at the federal level, because you're thinking, yeah, local cops and down in the South, and you always got, you know, the example of some idiot or whatever. But man, these used to be like the bastions of American society, where these were the people that if you were in trouble or if you were hurting, you could talk to, you know, law enforcement, you could talk to the feds, you could talk to your doctor, and you could get help and you could get answers. And now it's turned to the point, and how much of this is real versus how much of this is designed breakdown of America. For some of us, it's the last place many people want to go, is to talk to these people at all, because they feel like it's going to go from bad to markedly worse. If, you know, and I think it's part of just tearing down the institutions of America. But obviously there's millions of people that fall into both of those categories, that have made mistakes, that have done things wrong, that have had a bad agenda. But, you know, priests and pastors used to be another one, you know, too. And again, I think it's part of the breaking down of America. But all of that to say, and it's not just America, it's happening all over the world. It's a coordinated agenda to be able to disconnect people from safe places and actual information that can help them, for whether it's for money or whether it's for control. It's usually those two things. But in the age of misinformation and disinformation and who do you trust, what it did for me, and this was before 2020, at the end of 2019, I pressed into dreams because I had been following my dreams so much, and I had been going down rabbit holes. If I would have a dream about Lincoln, I'd buy a 35-hour biography about Lincoln on Audible, and I'd read it. And I'd watch 5 or 6 or 7 docuseries. I spent 100 hours studying Lincoln. And I even have the statue of Lincoln right behind me because he's such an important figure in 2 dreams in particular that I've interpreted. And so what I started realizing is that one of the sources that I know that I can absolutely trust is dreams. And I believe that dreams come from God, and that they're a supernatural message into our life. And in an age where we literally almost can't trust any other form of messaging because it's been compromised to be a form of manipulation, it's like, how can we find the truth of the world? And so one of the things that we've done, and my group, is we've really pressed into the dream area. So you've seen some dreams in your life, and you know, we've worked a little bit with law enforcement and different agencies on, you know, human trafficking, finding missing persons. Even had a friend that helped solve the murder because of dreams that she had. But you're kind of the door kicker, the frontline guy, whether it was the military or law enforcement. Distinguished career in law enforcement. Medal of Valor, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's, man. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
But I would love to hear, you know, what dreams that you've had, premonitions, thoughts, times that you know that the Holy Spirit or God or whatever just kind of stopped you from, don't go in this door, go in that door, or, help you to mitigate something becoming markedly worse because you had to make that split-second judgment call?
So, well, one thing is, I've been in 4 officer-involved shootings as a cop, and that's, bad guy pulling out a gun and throwing lead back my way, not pulling out a wallet or a phone. Like, no, they wanted to end Alpha's story. And
so officer-involved shooting means they shoot at you or you shot at them, or
both.
any combination, or both?
Yeah, in any combination. But in this situation, it's not like you're responding to a shooting. An officer-involved shooting means either you shot at the suspect, the suspect shot at you, or you shot at each other. And so, the second shooting I was in, which was in 2007. Yes, 2007. It was the night I was getting off probation, because in law enforcement, you got a very long probation. And, the shooting turned out to be the shooting, but it's the beginning of it that was pretty interesting, because it goes to learning to trust my instincts, which essentially I believe is going to have a direct correlation with dreams. And this, my buddy actually invited me to go to Denny's. It was late at night, probably around 10 in the evening. He had a rider with them, and it was a boring night, right? Nothing's going on. So he's like, dude, let's go to Denny's. I'm like, all right, well, the north end of the city has just been getting like just destroyed with residential burglaries. So let me just go do a couple loops around the streets out there, and then I'll meet you at Denny's. So he's like, okay. So I go to the most northern part of our city and park on the street. So it's the most northern street, as a matter of fact. So the south side, or the right side of me, is residential, and then the left side, or the north side of the street, is all desert. At the time, it's been developed. At the time, there was no development. And I park in front of a moving truck, like a U-Haul style truck, and turn off all the lights. And I go, all right, let me just sit here and listen and see if I see anything. And like I said, something drew me to that area. So I'm sitting there, and then a car that's driving towards that street, so I can see the lights in the desert, and they kind of cast across the desert and come this way. And so I'm looking at my side mirror, and it's driving really slow. So at that hour of the night, for a cop, that's like, all right, there's a red flag. It's driving very slow, because it should have caught up to me already. So now, and like I said, I'm in front of a moving truck, so it's kind of camouflaging my black and white police car. So by the time they do get up next to me where they can tell this is a cop car, I hit my alley light. It's a little side light, that shines out. And the 2 guys in there, it's 2 white guys, and they turn and they give me the uh-oh look, right? So I'm like, all right, there's red flag number 2. So they take off. I get behind them. I run the license plate, give it a dispatch. Dispatch says it comes back out of Havasu in Arizona. Not stolen yet. Eventually, it ended up being a stolen vehicle. But I start following this truck, and it stops right in the middle of the street. Doesn't pull to the sidewalk, just stops right in the middle of the street, and in front of a house that I know is a parolee house. Like, this house has cameras, this house has drugs, this house has guns. So when you look at this whole scenario, I'm like, I got probable cause, because he just violated the vehicle code. You can't just stop in the middle of the street. So my finger touches that little toggle switch that's going to turn on those red and blue lights, and I'm going to conduct a traffic stop. When I touched that switch, man, it felt like a 300-pound weight was holding my hand from toggling it. Enough to be like, when you kind of like, what the? And the passenger door opens. So as the passenger door opens, one of the things that we do is I immediately open my door, because if a guy's going to get out and start shooting, I don't want to be stuck in my car. And so he gets out. I don't hit the light. Like, something's telling me, don't hit the light. And I don't. So for the audience, just understand, for a cop, this is very frustrating, because it's like, I have everything I want here. Yeah. And now I'm looking at the passenger, and he's walking towards the house. He's looking at the truck. He's looking at me. He's looking at the truck. He's looking at me. And I'm like, now I'm angry. I'm like, well, there goes the gun and the drugs that I was going to catch. And, because I'm still a rookie, I'm going to make myself look good here. But something in me said, wait till he leaves. So I say, okay. So truck starts to drive off, and I tell myself, all right, as soon as he turns onto the next street, I'll hit my lights. I do. It turns into a vehicle pursuit, 120 some miles an hour. We jump onto the freeway. This is out in Southern California near Palm Springs area. And, by this time, like I said, it's maybe 11 o'clock at night, 11:30ish. And he opens up the center window to the truck on the back and he starts shooting. So it hits my hood, hits the light bar, and it's a gunfight on the freeway. CHP joins me. We end up stopping at Scirocco Summit, turns into the OK Corral, and we survived. He didn't. Turns out he was wanted for attempted murder. His brother at the time was still wanted for killing a cop, multiple guns, drugs. He was a member of a particular gang that's pretty well known around the world, and that was the end of it. So now we go back hindsight, trusting that intuition, that that the Holy Spirit, God talking to you. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt in my mind. I remember because they drove us, because we're in the middle of the desert, when they drove us back to the CHP headquarters, because we're waiting for Riverside County Sheriff's Central Homicide Unit to handle the investigation. I'm sitting there and the TV's on, and I can see my police car, still out there at the crime scene. And then it dawns on me right there if there was a mirror, I probably would have noticed I turned green. And I was like, my guardian angel saved me. If I would have hit that light and walked up, because here's the thing, he's the one that was going to make that traffic stop happen the way he wanted. He stopped knowing that I'm going to stop him for that. There's no doubt in my mind that as I approached that window, there was a barrel of a gun that was going to be waiting for me. And doesn't matter how good of a cop you are, that scenario, 9 out of 10 times, you're not going to win that, and, and because of the way I trusted, that warning, I'm alive today to share the story. And so just a lot of situations like that have happened in law enforcement. I kind of shared, some of the times, the tragedy from ignoring, some of those gut feelings. And so now I'm here with dreams. I had a great career, and a lot of it had to do with my work ethic, but a lot of it had to do with, an ability that I had at the time that I acknowledged it in my mind, but never shared it outside. And it was the ability to know where to go and when to go there, to find crime. I used to get called into, one of the reasons I have so many accolades in law enforcement was people wanted to confess to me.
Interesting.
on serious crimes. So, I would get called as a detective, and it's your case, like, you want the confession. You work so hard. But I would have buddies that are like, hey, man, come in and do this interview, because, we also understand what's more important is catching the bad guy. And I get called into cases, and they would just, blurt out everything that happened. And we would solve major crimes, including homicides or attempt homicides. And, I'm going to look to you as my spiritual leader to kind of help me make sense out of all of it, but there's always been this, internal and external ability to recognize things that, a lot of people just don't see, or maybe people see them, they just ignore them and they write them off the way I was doing for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think there's what a lot of people call as intuition. We like to call discernment, and we believe discernment is a gift from God. We believe that women tend to have a supernatural level of intuition that's different than men. One of the incredible differences about women is they just, whether they're more connected emotionally or to their heart, or more connected to God in some way, is they don't have a problem as much as I think guys do from time to time. That's a broad generalization, listening to that still small voice of, hey, you should do this or you should do that. And so I think that's really interesting. But, the Bible talks about, you will hear the voice whispering in your ear behind you, this is the way, walk in it. And that's just like that, don't turn on the toggle switch. There's been times where I used to get that even doing business deals, owning a finance company, and people to work with, people not to work with, things like that. But it's, It's just pretty interesting. I think there's a special grace to it, I believe, when your life is on the line. Like, it's one thing if you're just having friends or you're talking about a business deal and the stakes aren't that high. But when you literally, this could be your last moment if you screw up how you approach this vehicle, then I really believe, you know, God is with you. He is there and he can see. Did you ever have any dreams when you were in law enforcement or even in the military?
I did have one in law enforcement, and it troubled me. It's been, it was over 10 years ago, 15 years. It's a very long time ago. So I don't remember all the details, but I remember the gist of the dream. So I'm in my patrol car and I drive up to this neighborhood, and the neighborhood I'm driving up to is actually an old neighborhood, one that my cousins used to live in. It's nowhere near where I work, but that's the neighborhood that I'm driving into. And in the front of this house, there's these people that are arguing, a couple guys, a couple girls, I don't remember, but it's just a couple people. And all of a sudden, you know, one of the guys, and they're like gang member looking people, but one of the guys he's looking at me, and I can tell like something's really bothering him. And I just remember, I don't remember if he's saying stop or if he's putting his hands out, but he was communicating me like, don't get out of the car. But of course I get out of the car. I got a job to do. And when I get out of the car, the guy that's next to him pulls out a knife. Yeah. Cause I remember I thought he was going to pull out a gun, but then it was a knife. And so I remember I get my gun out and he starts to charge towards me, but it's a dream. So it's like, I'm going to try to make it make sense. He's running, but it's slow motion. So if that makes sense to you and the listeners. So I pull out my gun and I pull the trigger and the bullet comes out and it's like bloop, like right out of the end of the barrel. So I'm just like, uh-oh. So I pull the trigger again. And I think I do it 3 or 4 times and all of them just fall out. Like the bullet never shoots out towards him. And I don't remember how the dream ended. I remember there was something else that happened. I don't really remember. And then I woke up. But I remember the part that troubled me. It troubled me enough to the point where I had disassembled all my firearms.
Wow.
Cleaned them.
Yeah.
Checked them, function check, did a function check on all of them because I was like, man, maybe the man upstairs is trying to tell me like, you're going to have a malfunction or something.
Misfire. Yeah. Wow.
But I mean, no, even, prior to taking them apart, when I did a function check, they were operational, took them apart, cleaned them. I don't know what it ever meant, but it bothered me because I remember thinking like, because I had already been in 2 shootings, the first 2 shootings that already happened. And I remember thinking like, am I going to be in a shooting? My gun's not going to work. That's not a comfortable dream to have if, when you're still working on the job. But yeah, I do remember that dream.
Wow. That's a really interesting dream. Probably isn't literal. A lot of times we get dreams that are figurative. And particularly the fact that you were in an old neighborhood that was nowhere near your area. It's not on your beat. It's not going to be a place you would normally go to. So it starts right out with a setting that is different than what would be normal everyday life for you. It's interesting because a lot of the rest of the setting is typical. Obviously police officers get called when there's conflict, when people are arguing, when gangs are involved, when people have weapons. These are, you don't show up when somebody bakes a pie. You show up when there's conflict that's going on and it's about to erupt, or somebody's scared and thinks that it might. And so, of course, all of that is just a typical setting. There's a house, people arguing, there's gangs. But I think it's interesting how the one guy that was really bothered tells you not to get out of the car. And then, basically stop. And then you get out of the car, but it's his buddy that has the knife, right? It's not him. And he's the guy. It's almost like that guy knew that you getting out of the car was going to be a catalyst to accelerate versus decelerate, the scene de-escalate. It was going to escalate the situation. And that's exactly what happened. But what's really interesting is the idea of the slow motion running. I really like that because I'm one of those guys that when I'm in a car accident, everything slows way down. Everything's super clear. I hit a patch of black ice on the freeway once, and it's like, take your foot off the gas, turn into it, don't hit the brakes, be aware of your surroundings. Like, to me, it's just, it's awesome. I love that, because a lot of people freak out, and typically the kind of people that are in military or law enforcement, a lot of people have that too. So the fact that the guy's running at you slowly and you have lots of time to be able to respond, to do the right thing, to even think about, okay, is this what I need to do? This guy's charging at me with a knife, and you pull your gun and you do the right thing. And then you go to shoot him, but the bullet just comes out of the gun and drops straight to the ground. Just like, bloop. And this happens 3 times. It's really interesting because this is the idea of a faulty weapons system. What you're using to try to stop this aggressor is not working. So there's going to have to be another approach that you take. And it's interesting because what I think this is this kind of dovetails into the dream that we shared when you interviewed me on the Alpha Warrior Show, which was about the idea that God has given you a supernatural level of discernment for you to know things. And we talked about how you put on, your fatigues when you did the dog work, and the dog was like that other sixth sense that you would have, because the dog can smell and can know and can just, discern things from people that humans can't. And the dog is all over it. But that was like an attachment to you when you were part of the canine unit. When you were working with the dog, it was just like, that was, I believe, an overt outward expression of something that you inherently carry. And so even though the weapons were almost useless, they weren't prospering in what you wanted them to do, there was still plenty of time. So you had the sense of things slowing down and the time to operate and the clarity in the circumstance, which would be, you can either get your right hook ready for this guy to approach, or you could get back to the car and pull out another, grab the shotgun or a tire iron, or, you have time to respond because this guy's running at you in slow motion. And it's interesting because the running in slow motion would not equate to a bullet dropping to the ground. So it's not like the whole thing slows down where you're in slow motion and your gun's in slow motion. That's not what's happening. When we see that, like in a movie, a lot of times it'll be like everything slows down and no, but that's not what's happening. He was slowed down. You weren't slowed down, but your gun was not operating with the force needed to propel the projectile into the aggressor. So there's a verse in scripture that says, 2 verses. One is, no weapon formed against you shall in any way prosper. And the tongue that rises against you will fall, meaning those that accuse you or falsely accuse you or slander you, that they will be dealt with. Those people will be judged. But no weapon, somebody that designs a lie or designs a bullet or whatever, some sort of thing to harm you, and that's spiritually, that's reputation wise, that's mentally, that's certainly physically as well. This talks about the protection of God. But there's another verse that says, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty through God for the pulling down of strongholds and the casting down of imaginations. So this is about spiritual warfare. So you've heard this stuff before, right?
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
Yeah. And so it's the idea that the weapon that you were fighting with was not a weapon that was going to have an effect in this situation. And I think it was a hint that God was giving you. Just a lot of times God will give us multiple dreams over a decade, that when we start realizing what our identity and our destiny is, they begin to all make sense. And we even talked about that last time, but it's the idea that you have this sense that is going to allow you to react with clarity, but the weapons in the natural that you have, on the job or whatever, are not going to be the weapons that are going to succeed in those circumstances. I believe what you were seeing, particularly since the guy was the guy that was really upset. So you think the guy that was really upset would be the guy to attack you. But this guy steps out from behind that guy, right?
Yeah, he was like, not behind him, but off to the side.
Yeah, to me, that represents, it could even represent a demonic spirit. It represents a supernatural force that is coming at you, but that supernatural force is inhibited in that it can't come at you fast and take you out. And so it's coming at you in slow motion, and you can begin to see this thing as it's coming towards you because you are being protected. It can't charge you and, stab you real quick, shank you, and then that's it. It's coming super slow. But that being the case, if it is a spiritual thing, shooting at it isn't going to do anything. And that's what the dream represents, is you might as well dump your bullets out of the ground right here as shoot them at this thing, because it's like shooting at a ghost. And so I think this is a dream where God is beginning to kind of clue you into the idea that perhaps you're also a warrior on a different level. And I think it's interesting that it goes back to even your name, Alpha Warrior. But what were you going to say?
Yeah, it had to be like around 2011, 2012. Like, that was a long time ago. But while you were speaking, it reminded me of another dream I had about law enforcement. But this is since I've been in. This was September of last year.
Uh-huh.
And I get called out to, it's some type of crime scene. I don't know what it is. And there's some cops there, and some of them I recognize, some of them I don't. And everybody's in uniform. Like, these are uniform cops, nothing undercover. Uh-huh. And as I get there, they give me one of the police radios, but I'm not in a police uniform. Huh. So I'm there with all these cops, but I'm not in uniform.
So you're undercover, or you're just plain clothes?
I'm in plain clothes, but nothing in the dream, because I used to work undercover, but nothing in the dream made me feel like I was in that capacity. The feeling I got, my immediate feeling when I woke up, was I was a regular person, is what the thought was that was with me. And they give me the radio, and, they're telling me to get a hold of headquarters. And so I keep keying the radio, but the radio won't work. And so I'm keying it and keying it. And I do remember feeling like an urgency and a frustration, but I was never able to make that contact. And that was a dream. Super short, very, very direct, I think. And that was in September of last year. So what, 6-7 months ago?
Interesting. So were you still working in law enforcement then?
No, I was not working in law enforcement at that point.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting that you have a dream about law enforcement, that you're not wearing the uniform of a police officer, but you're not undercover. So you're basically a civilian and they're giving you the communication tools, but it's not working. So this is basically a repeat of the dream from over 10 years ago. And it's the whole idea that you have a calling in a different capacity. And the communication tools in that capacity are not going to work, because when you're calling headquarters, you're not going to call the police. If you're dealing with a spiritual circumstance, you got to call heaven. You got to get warring angels to come and deal with a situation, or you got to get God to move on behalf of what's happening. And so they're giving you a radio because they know they need backup. They know the problem is probably too big. And it's like, you need to call headquarters, and they recognize who you are. But it's interesting, what you're wearing is different, because what you wear in a dream represents a mantle that you have. Like, it represents, like, think of law enforcement as a gift or a mantle. And when you put on that uniform, you're putting on that authority. You're walking in that. You walk outside as a uniformed cop, you have a level of authority that you carry. You have a level of respect. You have power. You have all these things. When people look at you, they're immediately going to identify this is the identity of that person. Even from a long way coming, they may not know you're Luna or what your name is, but they're going to know that's a police officer. And in a right world, people would look at that with respect and with honor and with safety. And he's somebody that I can trust, and he's somebody that I can talk to. And, and obviously things have been twisted in the world that we live in, but that's the mantle. It's the authority that you carry. It's what you literally, the calling on your life. And so you don't have that mantle of law enforcement anymore on your life in this dream. But it makes zero sense then for them to relegate their communications to you and ask you to call for help. So what I believe is that there may even be a calling. There's an authority and a power on your life to call for supernatural help when the back is against the wall of your former comrades. And it could actually be law enforcement. In fact, this could be indicative of, see if this resonates with you or not, this could be indicative of a level of consulting that you would do with actual law enforcement, but from a different perspective, like from a spiritual perspective, from a higher perspective, because you'll have a set of tools that they don't have. And they're going to say, hey, you went through this, or we recognize you as somebody that can get help from somewhere else. And so we're going to ask you to call headquarters or call backup for us.
It's interesting because there have been two, one a former partner and one a former supervisor, who have since reached out to me in the last couple months for help with certain things.
Wow.
So
just in the last several months.
Yeah. And just to protect who they are,
Sure.
That's why I'm not giving the details. But when you were saying that, I was like, both good guys, both great guys.
Yeah. Well, I love it when that happens, because like the interpretation's immediately proven true. There's no way I would know that. That's not, again, even to protect you're not even going to tell people that because it's a confidential thing, but it's interesting that God will show us things in a dream. And I believe, so if you put both of these dreams together, there is a set of giftings that God gave you when you were born that have nothing to do with being a police officer. It might be one of the reasons why you were drawn to law enforcement and you were drawn to the military, is because God put this in your heart that you're a protector, that you're a leader, that you're a warrior, and you fight for the innocent. And that's kind of a mantle that you carry. It's a mindset that you have, that many of us that served have, right? But particularly law enforcement and military together. And what God is saying is your days as a warrior are not over. And what that means is you're going to fight now with a different set of weapons. And I believe they're going to be spiritual weapons. And I believe you're going to have a different set of comms. And I believe they're going to be spiritual comms. And part of that can be dreams. We've had the privilege of assisting different entities in law enforcement based on intelligence that we've gotten from dreams to solve particular things, or to assist in something that's ongoing, or to rescue children, which has happened in multiple different occasions because of a dream. And that's what we do, is we share some of those stories. Some of that is in the political realm with the campaign strategy. Some of that is in a medical or a business type of thing. But there's some stuff that we've done in your area with law enforcement and even with military that have been fascinating. But what I see is that there is a calling on your life. And again, this has to go back to the dream that you had, that you shared on your show. And by the way, guys, if you haven't seen the Alpha Warrior show, go watch the show. But in particular, the episode that he did with me, if you just go to Rumble and you put in John Redenbow, it's the top one. It's like the most watched show I think I've ever done on Rumble. And but we talk about dreams and spiritual intelligence, and we unpack a dream that Alpha had that is just it's like an hour long on download or decode. But it's interesting because both of these dreams fit right into what we learned from that dream. That what's happening is you have an identity and a destiny. It supersedes. It's why you were successful in law enforcement and successful in the military, but it supersedes. It's a calling that's higher than either one of those. Those were the tools that God used in your life to position you to fulfill what he wanted you to fulfill in that portion of your life, and to prepare you for the future. But I believe that there's a whole lot more that's going to happen. And since leaving law enforcement and since leaving the military, now you've taken on literally the identity as the alpha, as an alpha and omega, the alpha warrior, which whether you know it or not, is a moniker of a spiritual warrior. That's pretty interesting.
It's very interesting. So, I have tattoos on just one arm. People are going to think I'm weird for this. I've always felt like I can only tattoo my right arm.
Really?
So from my shoulder, to my wrist, I have a series of tattoos. And, growing up, a lot of my cousins had it. So my mom was like, just if you want a tattoo that bad, just wait till you're 21, and I love my mom. So I was like, I'll honor that. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, as 18 came and 19 came, and actually I didn't get my first tattoo until I came back from Iraq. It was a USMC tattoo. And then I didn't get my next set of tattoos until law enforcement, so waiting made sense. So thank you, Mom, for that one. But every tattoo I knew had to be something that was going to resonate with me. Like, not just because it was something artistic that I liked, but it had to have a meaning. And I always knew that I wanted a cross, so there was a bunch of different images that I compiled into one image. And right here on my right forearm is a cross. And one of the reasons I kind of liked having the cross there is that's my gun hand. Mm-hmm. So I always knew that, if I would, because if you draw on your weapon, it's to take a life. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted to make sure what was guiding me to make that decision was going to be God, Mm-hmm. But when I got the tattoo, it kind of has a Celtic look to it. I don't know. Yeah, it'd be too hard to show with the sweater. But on the arms of the cross that stick out on one side, and at the time, I didn't know where it came from. I just knew it meant something to me. But on one side of the cross is the Alpha symbol, and the other side of the cross is the Omega symbol. And in between the two is the dove, or, which represents the Holy Spirit. And just like I said, it meant something to me, and I got it. So when you were talking about, that stuff right now, I thought about it. Here's the other thing. And I didn't mention this when I was telling you about how my partner died. Mm. But during the event, you remember when I told you my partner, his vehicle got stuck when he went to, knock Jermaine's vehicle? Mm-hmm. A man showed up, and all three of us, because it was me, the guy that I was training, and then my partner, all three of us interviewed independently. We all described this guy the same way. Tall white guy, kind of looks like a surfer dude, and he had dreadlocks in his hair, and just kind of had like beach clothing, And he's on the back of my partner's. He's on the trunk of the police car, like trying to help it get traction in the dirt, like he's bouncing on it. We all described that. So here's the interesting thing: nobody could track this guy down to interview him to get his statement, because obviously it resulted in the death of my partner. Mm. There's all the surveillance video leading to that scene never shows that guy coming. Surveillance video on the other side of the scene never shows this guy leaving. So it's just like, well, we know the guy exists because all three of you described him independently. None of you guys ever had a chance to talk independently because everybody's separated when an officer dies for statements. Uh-huh. But nobody can find this guy either. And I remember, me and my partners didn't talk about it for many years. And I remember when the young guy, because the one I trained actually turned out to be a phenomenal man, a phenomenal cop, just the kind of guy we want wearing a badge, just a good dude. And I remember telling him, he actually told me, he goes, "Hey, I have a question about that night." And I was like, "Yeah, shoot, man, what's going on?" And he goes, "You think that guy was an angel?" And I was like, "Man, I thought about that. And his next question, obviously this got us really emotional. He goes, "But then why didn't he save Jermaine?" Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the answer then, because obviously I was like, that's a good question. Why didn't he? And it wasn't until, years later, I was thinking, man, he probably wasn't there to save him. He was probably there to walk him to the gates, make him, to let him know everything was okay. Take away his fear, take away his pain, maybe that's why he was there. I don't know. Like we don't know, but it was a thought that I had, and this conversation made me want to share that.
That's the same thought that I had as you were. I was processing that. I'm like, well, then why didn't he, if it was an angel, we always think in a human standpoint. Of course, we think that the worst thing possible is death, which it isn't, especially if you know where you're going. But it's just a transition. But we would, why didn't he save his life? But that's what I was thinking. I was processing this as you were talking, and I'm like, well, maybe he came to. Are there escort angels that I don't know. I don't know what the theology on that is, but I do find it very, very interesting that, it'd be almost impossible. I'm sure they looked at that at every possible angle when a police officer dies, and for him not to show up anywhere except in your 3 statements, that's probably a supernatural, what we call an encounter.
I mean, they were thorough. They even interviewed the homeless, aka what we refer to as transient. They interviewed transient people from that area because we thought, well, maybe he's a homeless guy, with the surfer look and the dreadlocks. And even the homeless people, like, because the homeless people know their people in their own community. They're like, don't know that guy. So
wow, that's crazy. That's really interesting because there's just a lot there. There's a lot there, and I know it's probably a really emotional experience. I appreciate you telling us that story last time. By the way, I was like, it did not turn out the way that I thought it was gonna. But I was like, wow, that's heavy. But yeah, so if you want to know the rest of the story, go back to the Alpha Warrior show and watch the spiritual intelligence episode when Alpha gets into the whole tragedy of losing his partner and what happens and how that whole thing unfolded. But we honor your partner for his service too.
Like I said, awesome man, Jermaine Gibson. I'll download a copy of that and send it to you so you can, if you want to put it on your channel or make it available for your audience so they can catch it there too. Did you want me to share the Trump dream?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, we're on a roll with these dreams. You were like, well, I don't know if I got any dreams. You got some good dreams, bro.
It's when you start talking, you're just like, this pops up and that pops up, and you start to remember. And I did order a dream journal.
All right,
just so you know. So, and there's a certain pin that I like because I used to. For those that don't know, I'm an artist. I love to draw, and there's a particular pin that I like. So actually, and Walgreens sells it. I went and bought it, and it's specifically for this journal. That's how much it means to me.
Wow.
But around around summertime of 2021, I end up having this dream, and I don't share it with anybody, because I didn't want to give anybody a misinterpretation because, I love my President Trump, and I didn't have the answers to this dream. So I just held it close to the vest. And so finally, I didn't actually share it with a friend of mine until 2022, early to mid 2022, a woman named Monica. So in this dream, Trump's on the podium, like he does like the speeches and the rallies.
Okay.
And it actually looks like a rally setup, but there's nobody there. Not even Secret Service. Like it's just him. And he's standing up on the podium, and, he's typical Trump. And I just remember in the dream, he just had this like command presence to him. Like he just like kind of the way you'd picture like a president or a general, like when we see Trump on his A game, like he had that kind of presence to him.
The Alpha Warrior presence.
Absolutely. Exponentially higher because he was the president. And he's got the red tie on. Like it's that, that very powerful image of Trump that a lot of us have come to know. And all of a sudden, in the dream, I know they're cops, but they're not wearing uniforms. They kind of look like Secret Service. They're wearing suits, but they're not all like black suits. Like some are black, some are blue, but they're all dressed very nice. And they come and they arrest them, and they take them away. And now as they're taking them away in the dream, like I can see different like television monitors, all these different like news broadcasts. Mm-hmm. And this is the part of the dream. This part of the dream is why I never shared it. because in the news that I'm watching, everybody's okay with it. Like, this isn't like, and I don't mean okay like everybody's cheering it on. I just mean everybody's fine. Like, they've accepted it. And I remember, because like I said, this is 2021. This is before the Mar-a-Lago stuff, the FBI raid. And I just remember thinking, like, how can, Republicans, MAGA, America, how can people be okay with this? And because I didn't know, I just wasn't going to share it. But that was the dream. So I ended up sharing it with my friend. And she's like, fast for 3 days, so, to get some, spiritual guidance, of which I did. But we never talked about it since.
So after you fasted for 3 days, did you get any revelation on it?
I did get revelations, but nothing that had to do with the dream. There was a show that I was thinking about doing, and I was like, well, should I do it? Should I not do it? And I actually felt I was like, you know what, go for it. Do the show. And I was like, okay. So, but like I said, completely, I got clarity, just not about the dream.
Wow, that's really interesting. This is not the first dream that we've gotten that brings into question the dream, the context. Let's just say there are other people that have gotten dreams that if you take them at face, I've had dreams that if you take them at face value, they make you wonder about Trump. You look at him like, you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought this guy, this is the opinion that I have, or that my friends have, or, I've never met the man. But this dream appears to show a different reality, and so I think it's interesting that one of the things that we've seen a couple of times in some pretty important dreams are the idea of unity, because unity, we're so divided in the world that we live in right now. We're polarized, like we're absolute opposites. You either love Trump or you hate Trump. There isn't this like, well, I think he's an okay guy, and you might make a good No, there's not that. You either have your truck wrapped in 3 American flags and like you annoy the crap out of your neighbors, or you are emphatically like you're picketing rallies and arrest them or whatever. You're flying the Trump baby balloon over New York City, or it's either it's there's very little about Trump that leaves room for middle ground. So to see the vast majority of the public accepting his arrest is really, really interesting. Now, when you say he was arrested, can you describe exactly what you saw?
Yeah. So they come up to him, they get behind him. There's one agent or officer on each side. They grab him by his arms. They put his arms behind him. Now I never see them handcuff him, or I never see the handcuffs. But then when they turn to walk him away, he's leaving the stage off. So if he's facing me, he walks off to his left, my right, as I'm looking at it, and his hands are still behind his back, but I don't ever see the handcuffs. But I just made the assumption based on like the body movements, and that's how he looked as they walked him off.
Does he say anything? Does he look upset or dejected or depressed?
No.
Do they put him into a car? Do they put him back into the presidential beast vehicle?
So the last thing I see is they're walking him off the stage, and then immediately as he starts going down the steps is when I see all the TV monitors. So I never see where they take him, and he never says anything in the entire time. Like I said, he just has that look, and it's the same even when he feels, because he never turns to look at them. Like he's in the dream, he's just focused straight, like at me. And so even when they come up and they touch him, like he doesn't like feel like surprised, or where he looks like, who grabbed me? Like nothing. Like they come, they grab him. He's still looking at me the entire time. They turn him around, and so he still has that look, and then they walk him off.
This is super interesting. This is a really, really interesting dream, because since the whole New York thing and the arraignment, or whatever you call it, we have been searching our dream databases to see if anybody has had any dreams about Trump being arrested. And the closest we got is somebody had a dream of Trump in a cage, which doesn't mean a prison cell. It doesn't mean a jail cell. It doesn't mean arrested. It wasn't an orange jumpsuit. But I think this is the first dream that I've seen about Trump being arrested, which is fascinating. And I don't know that it's literal, though it could be, because I don't know of a situation where the setting where there would be a podium and a rally and nobody there. Like I've been wrong though. There was dreams that I had dreams of in like March of 2020 that the NCAA made a ruling that no students could attend basketball games. And not just students, but family. And I'm like, that's the stupidest. This has to be figured. There's no way they're going to play a college basketball game to an empty stadium. Sure enough, 5 weeks later, that was the world we lived in. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That was literal. So sometimes God will show us stuff that's so beyond the realm of possibility. What's super interesting is I feel like there's one of two scenarios, because the biggest thing that's puzzling to us, which is the part that, you initially hesitated to share, is the fact that the general public, or what you were seeing, was everybody was okay and they accepted. They weren't mad. They weren't yelling. They weren't, how dare you arrest our president? They weren't picketing. Everybody was like, well, okay, things are as they should be. They're arresting that guy and everybody's like, cool, which is, but there wasn't a lot of emotional response at all, right?
From Trump?
People,
no.
No, but from the audience, people weren't cheering.
No, so it was not cheering. It's hard to explain, because as I'm watching the news clips, it's showing what happened, and it's like you're seeing people, but it's not like the news is recording like the audience or like Americans. It's just, as I'm watching the clip, I can feel that everybody accepted it. Like there was no like, yeah, they finally got him. And there was no like, oh my God, my president. It was just, they arrested him. That's okay. Like that was everybody. Like everybody felt that way.
Wow. Dude, this is a powerful dream, man. This is really interesting. So, and by the way, there were no television cameras at the podium.
Nope.
But yet then you saw it later on TV where there was the footage of him being arrested. So this is another way we know that the dream isn't literal. First of all, I don't ever see Trump, probably the rest of his life, no matter what happens to him, if he chooses to take a podium, there's going to be people there. Again, love him or hate him, there's going to be people there. People will listen to him. And it would have to be a drastic change in our world for people not to listen to him. But it's almost like an apathy, like people don't really care. Again, there's a whole bunch of people that are neighbors of ours, not necessarily friends of ours, that would be radically cheering and shouting and screaming in the streets in support of Trump being arrested. But that's not happening either. And then, of course, there's the other side that would be ticked, and people would be mouthing off, and they'd be, I don't know that they'd picket or protest, but they would certainly be stating their opinions, and you would know that in the dream. And you just note that people are just okay. So I think the first thing that is happening is the country is going to go through something that is going to be very sobering. And it's interesting because there's dreams and prophetic words out actually about what may happen in the month of May that could be those type of events. But it sounds like a sobering atmosphere. It's not a celebratory atmosphere. It's not a see, I told you atmosphere. It's not a, well, that's an injustice. It's just like, okay. So it's almost like there's been a level of seriousness that's descended upon the general public for them to look at this and not to be emotional about it one way or another. There's like a blanket of somberness, and I don't think it's going to be like this. So I'm not saying it's going to be like this. I'm not prophesying it's going to be like this. But to give an example, after 9/11, there was a very serious atmosphere in the country. People weren't cheering as hard for their favorite sports teams. They didn't really care who their politician was. It was a coming together, but a very, and I was a rescue worker at Ground Zero after 9/11, so I saw more than most. I mean, I was working with, the NYPD, the FDNY, the FBI, those guys, as we were, picking up body parts, and I was there for 10 days. It was just, it was crazy, but we saw more than anything, Vietnam vets who were part of motorcycle gangs that left Seattle and drove to New York because their country needed them. And they hadn't felt purpose since they came back from the war. And now they felt like they were part of something greater. So there were all these disconnected pieces of America, immigrants, black people, white people, people who could hardly speak English, chefs, priests. I mean, everybody was down there with one goal. And that's, is there anybody that we can get out alive? And that was people weren't talking politics. People weren't talking sports. It was all about the mission. And I think that there are times in a country's, probably during like the Cuban Missile Crisis, even though that wasn't a big tragedy, it was a very somber moment in America where people felt the weight of history and the weight of the decision-making of the office of the presidency and the government and whatever else was going on in the national tenure. They felt that like, this is a moment where we need to be measured in our response, And so I feel like that is something that can be happening. The other thing that I see as a possibility, to a lesser extent, but it fits more with what we're seeing today, is the idea of two different realities. And I'm not saying this is, so you're going to have to, he who has ears, let him hear. But if there was a belief amongst people that were Trump followers that he needs to be arrested in order for something to happen so he could turn the tables and be successful in whatever the next part of the plan was, they'd be like, okay, cool. But in that case, you would think the other side, the anti-Trump side, would be cheering and freaking out. And they're not. They're just like, cool too. So there's still that wet blanket. But it's almost like if the people that like Trump knew he had to be arrested, and the people who didn't like Trump didn't know he had to be arrested, but thought he should be arrested, then there's a level of an agreement, even though they're for completely different reasons. But to me, it seems more like the first. It seems like entering a moment where something happens that it sombers America to the point that it's not about the political scene. Like, the political stage is what they throw in our face to distract us from what's really going on in the economy, what's going on in the world, what the truth about, whatever issue you want to look at, whether it's medical side or global warming or culturally what's happening or blah, blah, blah. They throw the politics in there because politics is polarizing and it has a very good opportunity to distract. And so I think if there's something that supersedes that, if there's a level of not even a national crisis, but a national moment, like, again, the Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't 9/11. We don't have to have thousands of people die, although it could be that, God forbid. But it was a serious moment that is really interesting. And again, it's like what we talked about at the beginning is there's that rush to judgment. In our minds, we begin to think, well, if we were okay with him being arrested, then that means there's proof that he did something wrong. And I don't have a problem with a perpetrator being arrested. I have a problem with an innocent man and the abuse of power being used against somebody. That pisses me off, as it should every American. But somebody, I don't have a problem with this gentleman who decided to kill 5 people, doesn't even belong in the country, and that he's caught. We're all like, good. Now, I'm not cheering and screaming, but because it's a somber moment, but I'm glad he was caught. So there's the implication of wrongdoing, which we would think would make it be acceptable. But I feel like I feel like there's something else that's going on that we don't yet see, but we'll know when we get there. So I feel like this dream is, in a sense, prophetic. It's talking about a moment that would come. And now he got arraigned, but he didn't get arrested. He voluntarily went in and was probably signing hats for the cops. And you know how it was. People, hey, can I get a selfie? You know, I'm sure those guys were there, even though all the supervisors with all their suits, they were all there and they were trying to make it a somber moment. But I guarantee you there were Trump fans in that courthouse. And I'm sure there were people that, you know, did not, probably made some offhanded comments so they could go home and tweet about what they said to the president. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. You know, we talked about before we got on a little bit. We have a dream that somebody was going to watch Trump speak and they were staring at an empty podium. And it was an empty podium for a period of time.
He gave me goosebumps the first time. He gave me goosebumps again, man. That one gets me.
So it's really interesting, and this is why we look at multiple dreams at a time, because the juxtaposition of these two dreams, you know, it's almost impossible for us to think in the environment we live in now with Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson, you know, with the polar opposites happening in our world right now. It's almost unthinkable to think that Trump could be arrested and the vast majority of people would be okay, but not have an emotional response. Like, I can't imagine people not cheering if Trump got arrested, because there's so many people that just, you know, don't like the guy. But I also can't imagine the vast majority of people not being ticked. You know, so this is super interesting, but it's an interesting juxtaposition against going to a rally or waiting for Trump to speak and there's an empty podium. And I actually looked this up because sometimes God will just say, dig in to do research, because we'll find a timestamp or time, date, and location, and something happened that day. And so I looked at Trump empty podium, and there was a time when another political opponent of Trump's was speaking, and they were speaking at the same date and the same time. And for some reason, and I got to go back and research this again, and I will in light of this dream, for some reason, they didn't like what the person on the left was saying, but Trump was late. And so what they did is they showed the empty podium and they let it run. I think it was like ABC, NBC, CNN.
Well, then let me do this just in case you're going to say it. This way people are like, well, you said it because Alpha said it. Let me give you because if you have a picture, send it to me, because I remember very vividly what it looked like. Like the stage that he was on was very nice. Like very, very, like it didn't look cheap. You know, it looked like very sturdy, very strong. You know, I don't know what you call it, but kind of like that ribbon, like that ruffled ribbon, went, you know, like from the edge of the stage came across it, had the red, white, and blue, like that very patriotic color. Mm-hmm. Like the stage looked very new. I guess that's a better word I'm looking for than like sturdy. It looked new. Same thing, had the little teleprompter thing right there in front of them. Couldn't see nothing on them. No American flags. So that was interesting. There's no American flags, but the bleachers behind them, if anybody's ever been to like a rodeo or, you know, like those old rugged bleachers, like, you know, that best way I can describe it, if you ever been to a rodeo, like those kind of bleachers, that's what the bleachers look like behind them. So there was one set that was to his right. Then there was the main set behind him, and then another set to his left. And then right between his right and the back one was the gap. And it was just a big field that was behind it, like a parking lot or maybe an airport, like just a big empty lot that's back there. But the banners that were hanging on those stages were kind of like what you'd see at a rodeo or something, or a horse race. It was like the little ones that drape. Same thing, the red, white, and blue. But those also looked like older, not like beat up or weathered. They just looked older and faded. So the ones that were the stage he was on, everything looked brand new. but the stuff on the bleachers looked old and faded, and then like the bleachers didn't look like fancy. So if that matches up with any of the images you see,
well, I have the article. It happened March 3rd of 2016, or it's when the article came out. And I'm just going to read the first part. And I have, I can pull up, I'll do a screen share with the pictures here. Cable news can't get enough of the GOP frontrunner Donald Trump and revealing its fascination with his presidential campaign again Thursday afternoon by spending 30 minutes broadcasting live footage of an empty podium ahead of Trump's press conference. The bizarre scene played out as Trump prepared a response to denunciatory comments from former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. Media's Sam Reisman was the first to spot the cable news networks, including MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, were glued to broadcasting images of Trump's empty podium. It is worth noting that Trump's banner directs Mainers to text Trump to a number, presumably to allow the campaign to build its list. So Trump effectively got 3 networks to air a free billboard for over half an hour. The address had been scheduled for 1:30 when Trump didn't show. Each network commenced to provide live updates of an unattended stage for what looks like 30 minutes. Yeah, this is super interesting. It's interesting when something out of the ordinary happens in a dream that then is you're able to look it up because it's so out of the ordinary that it's not something that you would normally think that you would see or that you would witness. It's an interesting dream.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
All right. Well, we might have to end it here and reconvene another day. But we're at an hour and a half. But I think it's really interesting, this stream that you had. Thank you for sharing this stream. And we definitely are going to want to get some more thoughts back later. But because of technical difficulties, unfortunately, we're going to have to stop here today. So thank you again, Alpha, for being on with us. And we really appreciate you. And hang on, and I'll talk to you in just a minute. But thanks, guys, for joining in for today. And thank you for sticking with us, even with the technical difficulties. We were trying to pull up the picture of the Trump. If you just type in Trump empty podium, you'll get the article. I think it's the Washington Examiner was the one that I was looking at. You'll get the article. You'll check out the pictures. But take a look at that. And I know we're going to be back talking again soon. But also in the comments, we both like to engage our audiences in the comments. And so we might hear from Alpha and myself in the comments as well. But leave your comments down if you have a thought as to what you believe the empty podium and the Trump arrest to an empty audience. If you get thoughts on that, I think it's a fascinating concept. So we'll see you next time right here on Dream Talks.